Starman back in the news. He's put a lot of miles on his Tesla Roadster in the last 9 months or so. The red electric car and its spacesuit-clad mannequin driver, which launched on the maiden mission of SpaceX's huge Falcon Heavy rocket in February, have now made it beyond Mars. Next stop, the restaurant at the end of the universe. SpaceX posted on Twitter. Along with an orbit diagram, the car's entertainment display was programmed to read "Don't Panic," the phrase that adorns the cover of Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Starman, of course, is a cultural reference as well. It's the title of the 1972 song by David Bowie, and Musk said before launch that the Roadster would play Bowie's 1969 hit, Space Oddity, at full blast during its deep space trek, though Starman can't hear the famous tune in the airless void. Ultimately, Musk opted for Bowie's Life on Mars as parting music for Starman and the Tesla. Musk has said that he launched the Roadster and Starman because the duo is a lot more fun than the typical insert mass dummy payload. Launching a satellite or other valuable spacecraft wasn't an option because they didn't know how it was going to turn out given the risks inherent in maiden flights. Starman and his ride, which once belonged to Musk, won't stay beyond Mars forever though. As you can see in the diagram, the pair will loop back on their heliocentric orbit, eventually coming about as close to the Sun as Earth does. The Roadster and Starman will come within a few 100,000 kilometers of our planet in the year 2091. According to an orbit modeling study. The authors of that study, by the way, determined that the car will slam into either Venus or Earth, likely within the next few tens of millions of years. You can track the space mannequin and cosmic Tesla at whereisroadster.com. The Falcon Heavy's second mission, which will launch the Saudi Arabia communication satellite Arabsat 6A to geostationary orbit, is scheduled for January of 2019. A U.S. warship has shot down a ballistic missile in space as part of the latest test of the military's advanced interceptor technology, and the entire feat was caught on video. The clip captures the moment sailors aboard the USS John Finn intercepted the medium-range ballistic missile off the west coast of Hawaii. The SM-3 eviscerates its targets through the use of sheer force rather than an explosive warhead. Its manufacturer Raytheon describes the interceptor as a kill vehicle that rams into a ballistic missile with the force of a 10-ton truck traveling at 600 miles an hour. The armament can be deployed both on land or at sea. It's designed to intercept short and medium-range ballistic missiles like the ones Russia and North Korea are stockpiling before the inbound threats re-enter the atmosphere. This latest test marks only the second ever success for the SM-3, following 2 botched launches in which it failed to hit its targets. The MDA hailed the test as a triumph based on observations and initial data review, noting that it will continue to evaluate the system's performance. Even though Roborace's self-driving car made it all the way up the hill at the Goodwood Festival of Speed, it won't be operating on algorithms alone when its first season kicks off. Roborace has unveiled the car that will star in its inaugural season. You might notice one big difference between the car that'll run in races and the car that was unveiled previously. Namely, there's space for a driver now. What's going on, guys? That's because Roborace's first season will use manned vehicles instead of driverless ones. Roborace's original intention, and the goal it still strives towards in 2021, was to create a completely driverless race. The racing series would supply the vehicles and all the required hardware for autonomy, but it would be up to each team to create the algorithms and everything that actually made the cars run. That means each team would have cars performing differently, as opposed to a single spec of software that would probably lead to some boring races. That first season, which should start this spring, will be pretty interesting. According to motorsport.com, Roborace's Season Alpha will probably have a single digits worth of cars on the grid, but they won't be exclusively under the control of humans either. The race could be partly human-driven, with the rest left to artificial intelligence. The car that will be used in Season Alpha is actually based on DevBot, the vehicle Roborace used to help develop and demonstrate its self-driving tech. DevBot 2.0 will be shaped similarly to the Le Mans prototype, and it's capable of running under either human or computer control. Plans might have changed a bit, but Roborace is still insistent that it'll be worth watching the series. SpaceX is revisiting its satellite internet initiative, Starlink, and it now hopes to operate some of its spacecraft at a lower altitude than originally planned. In a filing to the FCC, SpaceX is now asking the agency to modify its license so that more than 1,500 Starlink satellites can operate at an altitude of about 600 kilometers lower than the company originally requested. SpaceX argues that this change will make the space environment safer, as it will be easier to get rid of these satellites at this new altitude when they run low on fuel or can no longer function properly in orbit. This update could also explain the unexpected behavior of two of SpaceX's test satellites for Starlink, which have remained in lower orbits than expected. Back in March, the FCC approved SpaceX's license for the first phase of its ambitious Starlink initiative, the company's long-term plan to launch nearly 12,000 satellites into orbit to beam internet coverage down to Earth. Initially, SpaceX asked for permission to launch satellites into orbits higher than 1,100 kilometers, but with this new filing, SpaceX is requesting that 1,584 satellites be allowed to operate at 550 kilometers instead. SpaceX said that moving the satellites to a lower altitude means that it can do more with less. Originally, the company said it needed 1,600 satellites, but moving them lower means that the company can get to the same results with 16 fewer spacecraft. And the lower altitude makes it easy to dispose of these satellites once they're done in space. At this height, particles from Earth's atmosphere bombard the spacecraft more rapidly, pushing them out of orbit and dragging them down to the planet. And on the way down, well, they burn up in the atmosphere. Making sure these spacecraft come out of orbit in a timely manner is crucial because of the vast number of the things that SpaceX wants to put in orbit. A constellation the size of Starlink could dramatically increase the number of operational satellites in space, raising the risk of in-space collisions. A recent NASA study argued that 99% of these satellites will need to be taken out of orbit reliably within 5 years of launch, or the risk of satellite collisions goes up quite a bit. The FCC still needs to approve SpaceX's request, but the Commission has declared November Space Month, so it's possible there may be some movement on this very soon. In the meantime, SpaceX says it plans to launch its first batch of Starlink satellites sometime in 2019.